Picture this. It's May 1945. The war in Europe is over. Berlin is in ruins. Warsaw is ash. Rotterdam, Copenhagen, Oslo, all scarred by years of occupation and bombardment. But there's one nation that emerged from World War II completely untouched. No bombed cities, no foreign occupation, no invasion. Sweden, surrounded on all sides by Nazi Germany and its occupied territories, somehow survived 6 years of total war without firing a single shot in anger. But this wasn't luck, and it wasn't cowardice. This was one of the most dangerous diplomatic balancing acts in modern history, a dance with the devil where one wrong step meant annihilation. Sweden sold iron ore to Nazi Germany while secretly helping the Allies. They allowed German troops on their trains while rescuing thousands of Jews. They declared neutrality while choosing sides in the shadows. This is the story of how Sweden survived World War II, and the impossible choices that made it possible. To understand Sweden's survival, you need to understand its geography, and one resource that would determine everything: the Kiruna mines in northern Sweden. These weren't just any mines. They produced the highest quality iron ore in the world. During the 1930s and 40s, Sweden supplied 40% of Germany's iron ore needs. Without Swedish iron, Hitler's war machine couldn't function. No tanks, no planes, no ships. Sweden possessed the one resource Nazi Germany absolutely needed to wage war. Here's the problem. During winter, Sweden's own Baltic ports freeze solid, so the ore traveled by rail to Narvik, a Norwegian port, and from there shipped to Germany. But Sweden didn't have a choice about selling. Germany was their largest trading partner, and Sweden needed German coal, coke, and machinery in return. Stop selling ore, Sweden's own economy collapses. Then came November 30th, 1939. The temperature dropped below -20 Celsius, and something far colder happened to the east. The Soviet Union invaded Finland with 450,000 troops. Stalin wanted territory, Finland refused, and Sweden watched its neighbor, its brother, being crushed by a superpower. The reaction in Sweden was explosive. Within weeks, 8,000 Swedish volunteers, 1% of the entire male population, crossed the border to fight for Finland. But officially, Prime Minister Per Albin Hansson declared Sweden would remain neutral. Hansson wrote in his private diary, "We send men but not our flag. We give weapons but not our word. Finland bleeds while we calculate." By March 1940, Finland surrendered, giving up 11% of its territory. Over 70,000 Finns died. Sweden learned a brutal lesson. Neutrality without military strength is just another word for victim. And Sweden's real test was about to begin. April 9th, 1940, 4:15 in the morning, Operation Weserübung. In a perfectly coordinated attack, Nazi Germany invaded both Denmark and Norway at the exact same moment. Denmark fell in 6 hours. The Danish government surrendered to avoid bloodshed. Norway fought back, but it was hopeless. In Stockholm, the Swedish cabinet held an emergency session that lasted 19 hours straight. General Olof Thörnell, Chief of Defense, presented his assessment. It was devastating. If Germany invaded, Sweden could hold out for maybe 2 weeks, 3 if lucky. The Wehrmacht had just conquered Poland in 28 days and Denmark in 6 hours. Sweden's military was mobilized but poorly equipped with outdated weapons. Then, on April 15th, a telegram arrived from Berlin. Germany had a request. They wanted permission to transport medical supplies and humanitarian personnel through Sweden by rail, from Norway to Finland and back. The cabinet exploded into debate. Some ministers demanded refusal. Sweden's neutrality was sacred. Others argued that refusal meant invasion. Foreign Minister Christian Gunther traveled to Berlin personally. What happened in those meetings remained classified for 50 years. On June 18, 1940, the exact same day France surrendered to Germany, Sweden granted the request. The first German troop trains rolled through Swedish territory. And here's the truth: nobody wanted to say out loud. It wasn't just medical supplies. Between 1940 and 1943, over 2 million German soldiers passed through Sweden, fully armed Wehrmacht troops traveling to and from the war. Swedes poured into the streets in protest. They called it betrayal, the death of neutrality. Hansen addressed the nation by radio. His voice was steady, but you could hear the weight behind every word. We navigate between Scylla and Charybdis. Every choice is impossible, but we choose Sweden. We choose survival. The dance with darkness had begun. While German soldiers rode Swedish trains, something else was happening in the shadows. The Swedish intelligence service, see Byron, was running one of the most effective spy operations in Europe, and they were working for the Allies. Colonel Carlos Adlerkreutz commanded operations that sound like fiction. Swedish intelligence officers intercepted German military communications, photographed classified documents, tracked U-boat movements. Then, hidden in diplomatic pouches marked routine correspondence, they passed everything to British intelligence. Winston Churchill later remarked, "Swedish intelligence saved thousands of Allied lives." But publicly, Sweden remained neutral. Sweden provided the Allies with details on German radar systems, troop deployments, even advance warning of German military operations. Germany never found out. But Sweden's most remarkable act came in October 1943. The Nazis ordered the deportation of Denmark's 7,200 Jews to concentration camps. The trains were scheduled. The SS was ready. What happened next was extraordinary. Danish resistance fighters organized an underground railroad, fishing boats, cargo ships, even kayaks, anything that floated. They smuggled Jews across the narrow strait to Sweden, just a few kilometers away. And Sweden? Sweden flung open its doors. Here's what's remarkable. The Swedish Coast Guard, instead of enforcing neutrality, turned on searchlights to guide the boats to safety. Swedish citizens waited on beaches to help refugees ashore. In October 1943 alone, over 7,000 Danish Jews reached Sweden. The Swedish government granted immediate asylum. No quotas, no questions, no limits. King Gustav V made a public statement that sent shockwaves through Nazi-occupied Europe. All refugees fleeing persecution are welcome in Sweden. And they came. Norwegian resistance fighters, Baltic refugees fleeing Stalin. By war's end, Sweden had taken in over 200,000 refugees, nearly 3% of Sweden's entire population. So here's the paradox. Sweden was simultaneously allowing German troop transports and rescuing Hitler's intended victims. They were walking a tightrope over an abyss, trading with Germany to survive while defying them in ways that could trigger invasion. One wrong move, and everything collapses. February 1943, Stalingrad. The German Sixth Army surrendered to Soviet forces. Over 300,000 German soldiers dead or captured. The myth of German invincibility shattered. In Stockholm, Swedish officials could read the map. Germany was losing, and Sweden made a calculated gamble. August 1943. Germany requested permission to transport combat troops, not medical supplies, but fully armed divisions, through Sweden to the Eastern Front. For the first time since 1940, Sweden said no. Germany threatened, intimidated, demanded. Sweden didn't back down. Germany didn't invade. By late 1943, Germany simply couldn't afford to open another front. Every soldier was needed in Russia, in Italy, in preparation for the Allied invasion everyone knew was coming. June 6, 1944. D-Day. Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy. The liberation of Europe had begun. In Stockholm, newspapers, no longer constrained by fear, printed massive headlines celebrating the invasion. Swedes filled the streets in celebration. September 1944, Sweden officially ended all German transit rights. No more troop trains, no more concessions. The dance was over. Sweden had called Germany's bluff and survived. But Sweden had one final mission. February 1945. Count Folke Bernadotte, vice president of the Swedish Red Cross, launched Operation White Buses. A fleet of white buses and trucks painted with red crosses drove directly into collapsing Nazi Germany to rescue prisoners from concentration camps. Between February and May 1945, these white buses rescued over 15,000 prisoners. They drove through active war zones, past bombed cities, through checkpoints manned by desperate German soldiers. One Norwegian survivor later wrote, "When we crossed into Sweden and saw the flag, we couldn't believe we were alive. Sweden, neutral Sweden, had saved us." May 8th, 1945. Victory in Europe. Stockholm erupted in celebration. Over 100,000 people filled the streets. Sweden had survived, but at what cost? After the war, Sweden faced judgment. Allied investigators documented everything, every ton of iron ore shipped to Germany, every German soldier given transit, every compromise made. Norway and Denmark were particularly harsh. They had suffered occupation, they had fought, and they had watched Sweden remain untouched. The critics pointed to undeniable facts. Sweden's defenders countered with different numbers. And there was Raoul Wallenberg, the Swedish diplomat who saved an estimated 100,000 Hungarian Jews before disappearing into the Soviet Gulag, never to be seen again. Prime Minister Hansen never fully defended his wartime choices publicly. When pressed, he would only say, He died in 1946, 1 year after the war ended. He was 60 years old. Some said the weight of those impossible choices had broken him. Today, Sweden stands as one of the world's most prosperous democracies. They send peacekeepers to conflict zones worldwide. Swedish diplomats mediate international disputes. Sweden leads in humanitarian aid. Swedish children learn their complex history honestly. The compromises, the rescues, the impossible choices. They learn that neutrality isn't the same as innocence, that survival sometimes requires moral compromise, that wartime choices are never simple. Was Sweden right to choose survival over resistance? Perhaps that's the wrong question. Perhaps the real question is, what would you have done? Sweden walked a tightrope between principles and pragmatism, between idealism and survival. They compromised without surrendering. They bent without breaking. They traded iron ore to keep the lights on. They rescued Jews while German soldiers rode their trains. They declared neutrality while choosing sides in secret. And somehow, impossibly, they survived. In a war where 6 million Jews were murdered, where 50 million people died, where entire nations were erased. Sweden's choice was survival, and sometimes, in the darkest moments of history, survival is enough.